Hot sports all plays. Hot sports all plays.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Well, good evening, and welcome to the ASAP Network. This is another great episode of Laker Talk One-on-One. Yes, we still go live on Sundays at 6 p.m. Central, but we have a special guest with us, joined us today. We got me as your host, Freddie. I got Doug. You guys seen him Sunday. We got Mike out there in Southern California, another Laker fan. But we're joined by the one and only Mr. Eric Pincus. He's from Bleacher Report. He's a writer. He knows a lot about the salary cap. A lot of great things. Laker fan, I believe as well. Let's welcome Mr. Eric to the show. What's going on, Eric? How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, gentlemen. Happy to be here.
Oh, no, we're good. Want to welcome Keith in the building to the show. I see her in the comments. Eric, tell us a little bit about yourself before we move forward.
Yes, I've been covering basketball NBA for a long while now. Started on a small website called Hoops World, wrote for the LA Times for 4 years, and with Bleacher for about 6 now. So been blessed, can't argue. I also teach at Sports Business Classroom if you're looking to get into the business of basketball, a job with a team or agency or media and broadcast. We have a program in Vegas in July. So check that out. Reach out to me and ask about it, and I'll hook you up. That's Sports Business Classroom.
Yes, sir. So, Eric, are you a Laker fan, first off?
Well, I grew up one in LA, but after doing this for a while, you especially working as a reporter, you put your fanship aside. And what you learn is that you make relationships, you build relationships with people, and then they go somewhere else. And those relationships stand. And now you're rooting for your friends to have success, and your friends might work for another franchise. I love the game. I love seeing the best at full health. I predicted the Celtics would win in the finals, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. But I find myself rooting for myself, really, to be right. Like I want to be right. So I predicted they'd win. So therefore, I'm rooting for the Celtics to win. It's very confusing. I'm not rooting for the Celtics. I'm rooting for myself. But if you grew up an LA fan and Lakers, that would be sacrilege. So it puts you through a whole different kind of process when you're a journalist. And I treat people fairly across the board and take out any of that fan bias that I grew up with and sort of just try to approach it with an even keel.
There you go. So let's do this. We're gonna do a little Q&A, go around table, let the guys ask you a question. Then we have a few topics, and we'll make it short, and we'll do it like that. Doug, do you have a question for Mr. Eric?
Hey, Mr. Eric, thank you for joining us tonight. Listen, I am a believer in structure with an organization. And I believe that if it's somewhat confusing at the top, the rest of the body will kind of resemble that in some type of way. You've been covering for a while, so I'm just going to lean on your expertise. How strong is the Lakers front office? Are there too many voices?
There's no definitive answer. If you go back a couple of years ago, they're great, right? Because they won a championship. So right now they're down. They missed the playoffs. So the answer is no. They're terrible now. Like the fan approach is that, it's results oriented, and AD doesn't get hurt. last playoffs, who knows what happens? AD is healthy this year. I think they'd be a playoff team. I don't know if they'd be still playing right now in the finals. And I will say that, like, it's not always true. You could, like, under the Donald Sterling era, and I covered that for the Clippers, they had success eventually. For a long time they didn't, but eventually they had that Elton Brand run, and then they got Blake Griffin and built out that Chris Paul run. And then, of course, he got booted, rightfully so. So I like the idea of, like, fish rots from the head kind of idea, that if the leadership isn't great or is actively bad or even evil, that the team would fall apart, that it wouldn't succeed. But I do think that things are cyclical in the NBA, and good moves. Sometimes there's luck. You can have success while being not very good at your job. So I'm not applying this specifically to the Lakers, but I'm saying in general, right? Now, if we look at the Lakers, Jeannie Buss is the governor. She is the final say on what the franchise does, but she listens to her advisors. And if you go team by team, most owners listen to an advisor who's outside of basketball, someone they trust, someone that they can talk to. And I think Linda Rambis has been with the team for 30 years, 40. I mean, she's been around basically forever, right? And so I have no problem with that voice. They've relied on Kurt Rambis's input because that's her husband, and they trust his basketball input. You do have the the general manager or president of basketball operations in Rob Palinka, who's the one who's setting the table, the menu of the choices that they make. And then you have Rich Paul, LeBron James, and AD in that clutch contingency. Obviously, they want their team to succeed, and they have a vision. So I do think there are a lot of pressures. They have Tim Harris, who's on the business side. He's an advisor too, and he's been around the team forever. And you have all the celebrities and all the pressure and the Laker fan base. So I do think it's been a challenge, and I think they've been. I wrote an article on some of the moves they made over the last 4 or 5 years, and if you look at my Twitter feed, you'll see at Eric Pincus. It's pinned to the top. I broke down kind of what they did over the last 4 or 5 years, and they really haven't managed their resources particularly well. So I think they have there's a significant room for improvement for the front office. I don't blame everything that's gone on in the last year on their structure. To get back to your original point of structure, they have a defined structure. Whether it's a functional one is kind of relative. Right now, we're talking in a loss season. 2 years ago, it was a win season. So I think we'll certainly learn a little bit more on how they deal with this adversity of this last year and how they react.
We would like to welcome Corey to the show. Corey, right now we're just doing a little Q&A with Eric. We're gonna let Mike ask his question first, and we'll swing it back to you. All right,
yes, sir.
Mike, do you have a question for Eric?
Oh, is he frozen?
Yeah, I think we might have lost him. Let's let him get back together. But Corey, you go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, how you doing, Eric? I'm Corey from the Alabama Sports Podcast.
What can I do for you?
So I was wondering, with the Lakers and some of the moves that they're potentially thinking about making as far as with Russell Westbrook. How do you feel about how they're going to use him going into next season?
Right. Well, that's first the question is, will he be there? And if you're the coach, just hire Darvin Ham. You're not going to touch any. You're not going to say, "Oh, well, we'll do this if Russ is here." But if he's not here, we'll do something else. You embrace who you have. So I don't take what he said as any authority that Russ is coming back. But I also look at the reality. Number one, he has a $47 million a year left, assuming he opts in, which he will before the end of the month. And that's not an easy contract to move, even though it's expiring. The advantage of it being expiring is that you could trade it to someone else and take on long contract back, right? So what if the Lakers don't want to take on long contracts back? Then his value is not very high. So I think they're sort of wondering what to do in the sense that LeBron James can extend in August, but he hasn't committed to that yet. So if they make any move for the future with Russ, then maybe LeBron leaves if it doesn't work, and then they've taken on bad contracts or they've given away draft picks. So I think the working assumption for Laker fans, probably the safe one, is that Russ is going to stick because the Lakers are kind of stuck in their situation. They don't want to go too far to build for the future until they know that LeBron is staying. And LeBron could fix things real easy. All LeBron has to do is say, I'm going to extend and lock in 2 more years. And now the Lakers have that security. So I don't want to point it at Jeannie Buss or Rob Palinka and say, you guys are not doing your job. I'm saying I get the uncertainty. You make these moves and you sacrifice the future and LeBron jets after a year, then you're screwed, right? So as far as how Darvin is going to use him, we haven't really heard much yet. He stressed, I think, like a 4-1, 4 around the outside of the perimeter, 1 inside kind of formation, and that doesn't tell me enough because, I've coached at the rec league level with my girls' team. They've grown up. My girls, they're no longer at the rec league level, but I mean, I ran all kinds of different stuff, and I didn't win an NBA title. You know what I'm saying? It's like 4-1 is okay, fine. How is this going to work when you've got a non-shooter in Russ? Is THT the other starter? He doesn't shoot very well. AD, to be frank, is a terrible outside shooter since the bubble, right? He shot terribly from 3. So now you got 3 guys you don't have to come out on. We don't even know who the 4th is. I mean, you obviously have LeBron, but you need spacing for LeBron, not LeBron be your shooter, right? LeBron isn't the catch and shoot guy. He's the one who's creating to kick. So I like Austin Reeves a lot. I think he has the potential to be a good shooter, but he didn't shoot particularly well percentage-wise. There's no guarantee they can bring back Malik Monk because they may not be able to afford him. If you can get a bigger offer somewhere else, they're limited in what they can spend with all that money going to the big 3. So it's going to depend on how they fill out the roster. They need shooters, but more importantly than shooters to me, they need athletes and defenders and legs, you know what I mean? And guys who have size. Look at what the Celtics are doing. And it's not like, I mean, Jaylen Brown, Tatum are really good shooters. White sometimes he's a little spotty. I think Smart, he's has some good numbers, but I don't necessarily trust all those guys as shooters, even Horford. And I'm not looking at their 3-point percentages. They're all solid, but I think the size and athleticism and depth is more important. Get defenders who can shoot some as opposed to shooters who can defend some. I think that was the problem last year. They never had enough guys who could defend and shoot. And so there was no space on the floor and there was no defense. So, Ham's got a big job ahead of him. And I don't know if he's set up to succeed with the roster from last year just coming back, right? Even if they're fully healthy, it wasn't a great roster. So that's really the question. Can they get the right pieces so that Darvin Ham looks good? I would like him to look good. I know I met him a long, long time ago and saw him as an assistant with the Lakers for a couple of years. I was around for that. And he's just a great guy, energetic, very positive, fills up the room. Some people you're around and you're just like, you just feel good about being around this person. And that's Darvin Ham. That's great to get in a head coach. And it's not just frivolous. It's not just like he's some fun guy. He backs it up with, a decade of doing what he does as an assistant. So I don't know what he's going to be as a head coach. No one knows. Lakers can't know. Darvin can't know yet until you do it. You are what you do. So, but I'm hopeful for him. And go back to your original question about me being a fan. Like, I'm a fan of Darvin Ham because of his personality. So I root for his success because of that. So I would love to see him get a team. I'd love for the Lakers to give him a team so that he can succeed.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. It's kind of hard not to be a fan of the man, especially after that press conference he did. After that press conference, gave me, as a Laker fan, I know so much hope. It made me feel a lot better. Made me feel a little bit more comfortable about our situation. I will say that. It kind of made me believe again a little bit. But that's a good thing. So I guess you kind of answered my question about Malik Monk. It seems like we're not have enough money to keep him, unless somebody don't value him as much as we do. I assume. But I guess my second question would be, what is the Lakers doing to help Anthony Davis prepare for this season? There's always a question mark. When is AD going to go down? Because we know at some point he cannot stay healthy. Are they doing anything special? Are they helping them change a diet? Are they giving them a special workout program? Or is the Lakers doing anything to help him stay conditioned or be ready for the season?
Well, I don't know the answer to what they're specifically doing. I do know that it was decided last summer with a big influence from LeBron that AD was going to play center this year. And so my understanding is that he put on like more bulk, and he the kind of workouts that he worked on were about being stronger and bigger and able to play a little bit more inside. And my personal thought is that his body just can't handle that. Like, he needs to be leaner. He needs to be a 4. And you could say, well, he's a 5 in the modern NBA. Okay, granted. It doesn't matter if he's a 5 or a 4 if he's on the injured list. You know what I mean? If he's not playing and he's not healthy, he's not active, then he's neither. So I'd play him at 4 and play him at 5 when it's advantageous. You're going up against Gobert, and the Lakers can destroy Gobert because AD is a tough matchup for Gobert at 5, then play 5. But against everybody else, or not everyone else, but the matchups where it's even, play AD at 4. He's a problem on the perimeter as a defender. Like, when teams are going into actions like pick and rolls, screen rolls, he can do so much damage. I'd like to see him at the 4, and I'd like to see them get a 5 who can stretch the floor a little bit and play some defense, block some shots. That's hard to do. Hard to say how many guys like that. And there's Miles Turner is like the prototype of that, but he's in Indiana. He makes about 20-ish million, and they're going to want a lot to trade for him. I don't know if the Lakers have those kind of assets. There's some free agents. Mo Bamba fits that kind of mold, but he's probably going to get an offer. Well, it depends on what the Magic do in the draft. If they take Chet Holmgren, then they're probably not going to keep Mo Bamba. But if they take Jabari Smith, they probably are going to keep him, and you can cross him off the list. I'd at least put a bug out that he's a possibility. Thomas Bryant is a former Laker. They drafted him and then waived him. And I don't know if, being that Rob Palinka chose to waive him and he was claimed by the Wizards, I don't know if he's going to want to reverse that choice. I don't know. But I do think, at least from my point of view, getting AD lean is the way to go so that he's healthy. And they'll say that some of the injuries were freak injuries, stepped on a guy's ankle, all that stuff. It always just seems to happen. And I have friends from New Orleans who said, like, yeah, that's just what goes with AD. That's what we had to deal with too when we had him. So I don't know the answer to, I don't think there is an answer necessarily, other than he's got to find the right kind of nutrition, body care regimen that keeps him lean enough, healthy enough, so that he can go out there and do his thing and play 70 games. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not asking for 82. Most stars right now are probably going to play closer to about 75, just days of rest and whatnot. Some go all 82 if they can. If you can get to 80 to 70 games, then I think that's a win for the Lakers, big time.
All right, Mike, while you're here, do you have a question you want to ask Eric? Eric is really trying. Don't let anybody get him. Corey or Doug, did you guys have another question?
I just say that, Eric, you just said a mouthful when it comes to AD, because I know he's incredibly talented. I understand that. I understand that he's potentially a top 7 or 8 player in the league, but I'm more of a realist. It is what it is. This man is fragile. I don't mean to say that. I mean, he was fragile at Kentucky. He was fragile at New Orleans, and he's fragile so far with the Lakers. At some point, you have to say it is what it is. And the reason why I bring that up is because, I'm looking at the greatness of, what LeBron is doing. But we have to start looking, I said this on the show the last time, we have to start looking toward maybe 2-3 years down the road when LeBron is gone. And are we really considering building around a guy who traditionally will only give you maybe 50 some odd games? I mean, he's missing at least 30 games a year. I mean, it's no question that's it's hard to say, okay, he's our future because he really hadn't even really entered his prime yet. But I mean, it is what it is. I understand we need to be, pessimistic a little bit, but this guy is, he's known for, to me, and I'm not trying to be, such an insulting guy, but man, I'm looking at his wardrobe better more than I'm looking at him in the Laker uniform. I mean, I'm just calling it like it is. He when we need him, it's always something with him, and he's been this way since he was a young man. Yeah, this just didn't start. It's been that way. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, and I know this is kind of like reaching, but is their attitude, and you may not have the answer to this, that you really can build around this guy? I mean, I know he's super talented, but can we really talk about this 2 or 3 years down the road? That's what I'm kind of asking.
Well, so when you say 2 or 3 years down the road, like right now, LeBron has 1 year left. That's this coming season. AD has 2 years guaranteed left, and then he has an early termination option. So if he wants to be free agent, he can leave in 2024, or he could stay and leave in 2025. Now, around 2025, in theory, is when we're going to get a new TV deal, which should mean a big influx of money. So he might want to hit free agency that year. And we're going to have a new CBA potentially for next season, not this next season, but the one after. So 2023-24. So the rules will be a little different. So some of those, there's no answers to some of these questions because no one knows yet. We can project. I think the Lakers would love to have LeBron, despite his age, agree to stay for as long as AD is under contract. So 2 more years. So, and that's what he can legally do in an extension. And if LeBron would simply say, let's do it, let's lock it in, now the Lakers can say, okay, we can trade, or we could take on salary that's adds a couple of years. So a Gordon Hayward may not be a contract that they want, and he may not be the kind of guy who can contribute in the way they need, but he could be a step towards making other moves that could, maybe you get another piece along with Hayward from, maybe you get some depth from Charlotte along with Hayward. So there are ideas like that, or a Malcolm Brogdon, who, by the way, is like injured as much, if not more, than AD over the course of his career. So you have to, and Hayward's been hurt too. So, since he broke his foot, he's never been the same. So, but those are the kind of issues I think that can supplement this team if they make those kind of moves, if they have the kind of commitment. Thinking beyond the next 2-3 years is too abstract. Like AD isn't getting through these years. It's hard to imagine him like 3 or 4 years down the road as he gets into his 30s. It's just, it's too abstract. And the money's going to change because of the TV deal. The CBA is going to change. But what the Lakers can do in the here and now is know we've got AD for at least 2, if not 3 years. If we can get that same commitment from LeBron, maybe we're willing to trade a future first. Maybe we're willing to take bad contracts because we're in this win now state. But there's no one on this roster right now who necessarily is going to be there in 3 or 4 years. Like, I mean, if LeBron is aging out and AD isn't the number one guy, I mean, really all you have is like the young guys like Austin Reeves, Wenyen Gabriel, Stanley Johnson's relatively young. You have Kendrick Nunn off of an injury, assuming he opts in. And that's it, right? Like you have Russ, LeBron, and AD. They don't have anyone on the roster of note. They don't have a draft pick in the draft. So their front office is really good at finding guys like Austin Reeves, Alex Caruso, drafting guys like Josh Hart and Larry Nance late in the first. They don't have a first, but finding guys around the margins. But no, I don't think you can win much of anything with AD as your best player. I think he's your second best player is fine. Like he's an elite second best player. But I don't think he's your best. LeBron is that. And that you're married at this point to someone who's near the end of his career is a factor. But this last year, offensively, he was brilliant. Defensively, not as much, but he carried the team offensively, even though he didn't carry them very far. So we'll have to wait and see what AD can be. And I'll throw one last point in about AD and the Lakers. You look at what happened in the bubble. They won. They beat the Heat. The next year, both the Heat and the Lakers, the teams that had the shortest turnaround, were pretty much a non-factor in the playoffs the next year. They just didn't have the legs. And if we say AD is just if we say he's fragile in a way or he's not as strong physically, then that's going to impact him more than other players who can handle that kind of grind. The quick turnaround, I look at it like now they've been off since April. Like this is the most time he's going to have off, the biggest opportunity he'll have to really heal from dating back all the way to the bubble. So this is really his time. There's a lot of reason to be optimistic that with this time off, that he should be more of what he used to be, which is not that long ago, right? And that you look at how good the Heat were in this playoffs. Maybe if the Lakers just kept it together and added to it, they would have been as good as the Heat. Maybe a Western Conference Finals team, maybe further. But I do think AD, needs this rest, and so maybe this is a blessing in disguise for the Lakers and this early exit. If you're not going to win it all, just miss the playoffs, get extra rest, and if AD can be what he's supposed to be, then he'll be at this next season.
Shout out to my uncle. He's watching, my Uncle Donald. Eric, I got a 2-part question for you. I was reading online that the Lakers are interested in getting a draft pick in the second round draft pick. Is that true? How they can do it? And my second question is, what is the status of a THT? Would he be with us next year, or could you see the Lakers making a trade?
Sure. Well, the Lakers every year contemplate buying a pick, and in some years they have. They bought the pick for THT. They bought the pick for Isaac Bonga. They bought the pick for Jordan Clarkson. And when I say buy, it means they traded and included some sort of assets or cash to do so. They don't have a ton of assets, but they don't really have any first rounders of note. They can trade a 2027 first rounder or a 2028 first rounder before the draft. After the draft, they can trade a 2029 first. So they could technically trade 2 firsts, 2027, 2029, and they could agree to it before the draft. Sometimes you have a deal where the guy gets drafted, he puts on the hat of the team, and it's already been told to us through guys like Woj or Shams that the guy's being traded. And they go through the TV interview, and everybody knows he's not going to that team except for the people in the gym on the show when they're talking about, hey, how do you want to play for the Hornets? He's like, yeah, whatever. And then 5 minutes later, he's part of the Clippers or something like that. I guess that would be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Anyway, how do you buy a pick and how do you go about that? Basically, you look for teams that have too many picks and not enough roster space. So I don't know how diligent the Lakers are with this sort of thing, but I look over at the Grizzlies and I see they have a full roster. They've got more than one pick. They can't possibly they have up to $20 million in cap room. If they're going to keep Tyus Jones, if they're going to keep Kyle Anderson, I don't know. If they're going to make some trades, are they going to let go of some players? The Lakers, nobody can know that. The Grizzlies probably don't know. Like they probably have ideas of what they're going to do, but they don't know yet because they're just not there yet. But you look at teams like that probably don't have the room, and certainly the Thunder are the obvious because they always have a zillion picks. You reach out to them and say, do they want to give up a pick? You offer them maybe a future pick, like a second or something like that. Or the Lakers do have some cash, and I don't know what their appetite is for that, but they can trade a significant number of they could trade money based on this season and next season. If you put it together, they could buy more than one pick. So there's a lot of they have a lot of spending power to buy a pick. I don't know if they're going to do it or not. I know that they're always preparing for the draft, like they're drafting, whether they're drafting or not. And it's just a question of finding a team that's willing to give up a number that fits around where the Lakers like the players. Like, because they may love like the first 20 players. I don't know specifically in this draft, obviously, but let's say they love 20 players and they get the 30th pick. Well, then it's like, well, I don't know if I want the 30th pick. But if they love 40 players and you get the 30th pick, now you're like, great, we've got 10 guys to choose from. So I trust their drafting probably more than any other aspect, just because that's the most proven as far as track record. So I do think it's possible 1 or 2 picks. They have to fill a lot of roster spots. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of guys. You mentioned THT. He's under contract for 1 more year after this with a player option. So this is technically, it could be his last season, and then he can opt out and go somewhere else. that kind of diminishes his trade value because most players his age or his experience are just hitting free agency now, and they're coming off seasons where they made like $1.8 million. So he's been overpaid, but they're going to be, a lot of those players are going to be restricted now. So the team has the advantage of keeping him. If you trade for Taylor Horton Tucker, who's 21, 22, and hasn't really blown up yet, and then he blows up, well, then he's going to opt out and demand a ton of money. And he's rep by Rich Paul, who's a very good agent, who's a very demanding agent, which he should be for his clients. And so you're going to have a tough fight, and you may end up having to overpay Taylor Horton Tucker. So how much do you give up as opposed to letting him blow up maybe somewhere else, and wait for him to blow up and then try to sign him as a free agent maybe? Or if you trade for him and he doesn't blow up, well, then you wasted your time. So I think the Lakers could try to trade like Taylor Horton Tucker and Nunn, and that can get them to about 17 or so million in bringing someone back, maybe a little bit more. And if they were, there are other ways about it, but basically I could see them looking to see what's out there. But at the same time, they need depth. They need bodies and guys who can play. So it's not like, if Nunn is healthy, he was a big reason why the team was bad last year. They didn't have a backup point guard. He was supposed to play. They probably pegged him to play 27, 26 minutes a game, maybe 30 minutes a game. So we'll have to wait and see if that's the right move. Taylor at $10 million. I don't know how much he brings in trade alone. But Lakers have a lot to figure out. I don't necessarily trust their decision making just based on their track record in trade. But you learn from your mistakes, at least you should. And so we'll see what they manufacture.
All right, we want to welcome Phil to the show. Before we get to you, Phil, Mike, we got you. Mike, is there a question that you have for Eric?
Yeah, Eric, I was going to ask you. You're talking about who's making the decisions with the Lakers, and I think that's really the most fascinating part of all this. Especially, we know the Lakers are kind of run like a mom and pop organization, which they've been ever since Dr. Bell's got the team. And it was Jerry or it was Sharman or it was pretty clear. In recent years, it seems a little murky, right? You mentioned the Rambuses, which a lot of fans are not crazy about. Jeannie's known Linda since 1980 when she came to the 79, really, with the LA Strings, blah, blah, blah. And Kurt's in there, and a lot of fans are not fond of Kurt's, after basketball, whatever he's done. So what is the hierarchy here? Is it Rob has to kind of talk to Kurt, and then Magic's involved? Magic's obviously in the mix somewhere. I'm sure she talks. How does this all work, or does it depend kind of on the decision what they're going to do?
Well, I'll say this. What's the best way to say it? Sometimes media will ask a weighted question and get an answer that doesn't mean what they interpret it to mean. So if someone says to Jeannie, do you get advice from Magic? She's going to say, oh, yeah, I listen to Magic still. We're really close. I hear what he's, we talk all the time, blah, 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 blah. That's all true what she said. Does that mean he's an advisor who's guiding the decisions? No. Is that author going to write a story saying that Magic is advising the Lakers? Yes, because that's how they're interpreting that question when the answer is more of a politeness. Is Phil Jackson actively involved? No, and Phil is not actively involved. Does she talk to Phil? Does Kurt talk to Phil? Yes, that happens. Is Phil aware and on top of what's going on in the league right now? Is he watching games religiously like someone who's a basketball operations chief should be? No, he's not. He's living in Montana doing what Phil Jackson does. Let him be Phil Jackson. He does have an influence. He does have, Kurt Rambis being a disciple of the Kurt Rambis tree is certainly going to ask him things and confide in him and get advice. So I want to kind of put aside like the Philness, the Magicness, that they're just voices, but they're not in the room. They're not making the decisions. Jeannie is ultimately the one making the decision, but she's always been very humble about her own knowledge of basketball, where she doesn't want to overstep, and you should respect that. And I think it's better when a team owner isn't, I know everything, and I'm going to make all the decisions. Mark Cuban is that way, and he's had success. His team is doing really well. From what I understand, he's like full on. Robert Sarver with the Suns has a lot of issues with that organization with an investigation, but he's very involved. Vivek in Sacramento is reportedly, from people I've talked to, very involved. and influences the decisions. I've literally talked to people who were GMs who had like the son of the owner call them up screaming before the draft, like, you have to draft this guy. Like it's owners and ownership groups can be crazy messes. They can be so much harder to deal with than other teams. Like it can be harder to sell your owner on something or your governor on something than another team at times. So I think Jeannie, from that point of view, is a positive as far as her leadership style. She is someone who listens to her basketball staff. Now, is she listening to the right people is the question. And I think that goes to the heart of it. How much power does Kurt have? How much power does Rob have? Where's that decision making? Do they value? They didn't value Alex Caruso. Okay, so if they didn't value Alex Caruso, you worry. They traded a first and Danny Green to get Dennis Schroeder, and then let Dennis Schroeder walk. And Dennis Schroeder does not have a great reputation around the league as far as a personality. He's not a bad human being. He's not evil, but teams and players tend to not gravitate towards him. And that's what happened in LA, and they moved on. But I knew that before they traded for him. Did Rob know that? I don't know. Maybe he said it was worth the risk, but ultimately it didn't pay out. And little tidbits like, trading a second to get Gasol, dumping JaVale, who was a valued part of the Suns this year, and then trading in the same season another second to get rid of Gasol after getting rid of a second and McGee. You start to see like a pattern of not really, minding the margins. And from my point of view, they're not a small market team, but if you're a team that is deep into the tax or fully stocked, you can't just spend money. It's not a matter of just being a rich team and you go buy whatever you want. Once you're up to a certain level, it's very hard. The Warriors, they get lucky with some players like that. Otto Porter got hurt the last few years and took the minimum, but he might not take the minimum next year. And Gary Payton II probably wants more money than what he's been getting. And you start going down the list, they drafted well with, Poole and some of these guys. But once you're up at that money, you don't have 10 million. The Lakers can barely keep Monk because other teams can probably offer about 10, and they're probably stuck offering him, call it 7. It's a little bit less than that. And that's just in the first year. And if it's actually like a 4-year deal starting at 10 versus like a 3-year deal starting at like 6.5, we'll call it, right? It's a significant amount of money over the life of that contract. So they need to mind those margins, and they're not. And because of that, they've diluted their talent pool, and in a big deal they sent most of it to Washington. And they could use Kuzma right now, who's a versatile defender and another scorer. And yeah, role players are are rarely going to be consistent enough because they're not going to get enough touches to give you 20 a game. So if he gives you 12 or 14 a game and fits in, that's more valuable than someone coming in and maybe putting up more points, but doesn't play defense and isn't versatile, because Kuz can play 2, 3, 4. KCP, streaky as hell, right? But he'll run through a wall for you, right? And part of the LeBron clutch family, that's his family. He got exiled, and it's tough for a guy like that who gave a lot and had been there even longer than LeBron. And Caruso, all defensive type player. He had that rough injury because of basically an ugly play. That was the kid from the Bucks.
Grayson Allen.
The kid? Yeah. Grayson Allen went and knocked him on his butt and broke his hand or wrist or something like that. And then you gave up a first, and all to get Russ, who is a name. And I think that's really where they get stuck. Like Andre Iguodala, who I'm fond of, is a name, right? He's been great. He's been NBA Finals MVP. He was a star in his own right with Philadelphia. But right now, Andre Iguodala, the name, is not Andre Iguodala, the player. And they're better off with Gary Payton, who has a name, but it's just because he has his father's name. He doesn't have that reputation yet. He's building it. Falling in love with names, like Trevor Ariza is a name. And, of course, he used to be with Rob at Landmark before, when Rob was an agent. Rob Palinka was an agent. So there's a series of decisions you have to make, and it's about putting the right pieces together. You look at what Boston's doing, and the pieces just fit. Like, if they need to go big, they've got Daniel Tice backing up Williams and Horford. That's 3 bigs that you can play. Now, you can't necessarily play that against Golden State, but against the teams that you need to go big, you got it. Plus Jaylen Brown's big, Tatum's big, and Smart is big. Or if you need to play smaller, you bring in Derek White, and now you have it. And Derek White is similar enough to what Marcus Smart is that you don't have to change styles, right? It's not like you're going from like Marcus Smart to DJ Augustine, who the Lakers just had. DJ Slight, a good shooter, can run the pick and roll a little bit. I thought he was pretty good for the team this year, but he can't defend because he's tiny. I mean, he's been tiny. He's like maybe 6 foot. I don't know what he's listed at, but he's barely 6 foot. And he's not like physically imposing. Like Derek Fisher was just a little over 6 foot, but he was strong as hell. There's a big difference between that body type. So I think they fell in love a little bit with names and less about the team concept. And that's where Russ came in. I don't know if they can fix it, but as far as the hierarchy and the structure, it's Linda advising Jeannie with the basketball influence of Kurt Rambis, whether you like it or not, whether you like his analysis or not. You have Rob, who is ultimately the one preparing the menu of choices they pick from. He's the one talking to other teams. He's the one talking to LeBron. He's the one talking to other GMs, other agents, everybody else. And he's saying, okay, this is where we're at. These are our choices. Now, he's filtering out the choices he doesn't want. So maybe they don't see the whole picture because he can control that message because he's writing up the menu. Maybe he doesn't want to put something on the menu because he doesn't like it. And, so these are the kind of things that you have to deal with. And that's not specific to Rob. That's specific to any general manager who's presenting to an owner. So I'm not dumping on him. I'm just saying that's how it is. And then, they've got the influences of the Magics and the Phils. But ultimately, I think that's the core of it. I don't think their structure is flawed per se. It's just the people making the decisions didn't value Alex Caruso as a basketball player enough to make sure he was a priority. And when I evaluate a team, I look at Alex Caruso and I value him because guys who can impact the game without scoring are sometimes as important, or if not more important, than guys who can. You obviously need your jaw if you're Memphis, but the rest of that team is all guys who can do everything else, right? I mean, some guys score more than others, but they, like Bane can shoot, but he's also big and tough. And Jaren Jackson Jr. can block shots and protect the rim and do other things if he's not scoring. In the case of an Alex Caruso, he can get you 4 points or 6 points, but be really the most important role player of the game and take so much of that burden off of AD or LeBron when he was the trump card in the series against the Heat. They started him in game 6 to close out the series. But they looked at him and said, nah, we don't need him. So that's, to me, where we differ, how I see basketball and they see basketball. We don't view players the same way. And not to say that my way is right, because there's a lot of different ways to do it, but the track record of this last year, and then to me, the track record of the way they've diminished their assets. I don't want to treat players like assets, but picks and things like that. They haven't really done the most that they could have with a championship team. I think that team probably falls flat that second year, no matter what, because of the bubble. But I think they should be improving upon it this year with the same core and add Malik Monk and Melo to last year's the team that fell to the Suns. Give that team a healthy chance with the exact same roster and just add in a couple of dudes. I think you'd be fine. But they obviously went in a different direction.
All right, we'd like to welcome Philip to the show. Philip, do you have any special question for Eric?
First and foremost, Eric, thanks for joining us. Sorry for being late, gents. You mentioned some amazing points, Eric. So I want to talk about the future of the Lakers for a second. When LeBron first recruited AD, right, they had aspirations for multiple championships. As we know, AD's been injury prone since the days at Kentucky. So do the Lakers have a contingency plan for the future in case AD is not the answer to build around, or what do you think about that?
Well, so that's the thing. Like LeBron can leave after this year, and they've for a long time, I would argue, misguided, have saved their money for 2023. Now, the best free agents, it's an adequate free agent class, but most guys are extending, and like Jokic was probably the biggest name, but it's not. He's going to get if he hasn't already gotten his money, I forget. Basically, he's not going to be a free agent. So I don't know who they were waiting for. The idea is like if they were planning on LeBron leaving after this season, then fine. But if you're paying LeBron $45 million to stay, or in that range, 40, whatever, 46, and you're paying AD 40, and maybe you pare down the roster to nothing, you might get 20 something to spend, but 20 something to spend is less than what you would get if you had 10 million this year and 10 million next year, or that's still 20, right? Like if you're going to pare it down to nothing. So part of the reasoning, I think, of why they didn't go with the Carusos and some of the choices that they had, DeMar DeRozan, whatnot, is because they had multiple years, whereas Russ expired in this timeline. But I don't see them being a team with cap room of note unless LeBron leaves, and that's really where they're kind of paralyzed, because if he doesn't commit, he can't commit till August. He could verbally commit; it's non-binding, and ideally they would have that commitment before 2 weeks from now, right? When we have the draft, it's less than 2 weeks, isn't it? Right. So they need to know what their future is. If LeBron is sticking, then they can make a whole bunch of moves. If not, then he's got to go. He's gonna go. And then AD, then you have to think, well, maybe it's time to get out of AD, see if a team could use him and trade him so that you could start over. I know Jeannie has said outright in interviews with other reporters, I think Sam Amick of The Athletic, that she doesn't really have the appetite for rebuilding like they did when they went through the draft to get the Ingrams and Lonzos and Randalls, all those guys, D'Lo. And that's my memory of the quote. I don't know the exact words she said, but the idea, that was the sentiment. And I get that. So I don't think this is a team that wants to go and be bottom, but they've managed their money where they don't have Luol Deng. They don't have Timothy Mozgov. And I think they're trying to avoid those kind of moves to make sure that if they have to go in a different direction, move out, either maybe if LeBron leaves, maybe you have some money to go get somebody to play with AD, or maybe you move AD and get value back and then also have money. So they've made 2023 a pivot point for them, which is after the season. And it's also when there's a new CBA, most likely. And then the next pivot point after that would probably be 2025 if they do get that commitment from LeBron and AD to finish out their contracts, and then LeBron stick it out for 2 more years beyond, which he can do this August. He could just say, okay, 2-year extension, boom, now you're lined up. Both expire 2025. Lakers going to 2025, 26 with probably a massive cap. Well, I don't know how the cap is going to jump, but assuming there's a lot more money, the cap may jump. And nobody on the books, or, small numbers on the books. That's a viable way. So, they don't have anybody right now outside of AD and LeBron and Russ, THT, and then I think highly of Austin and some of the other guys, but there's no one on this roster right now that needs to be here necessarily in 3 years. So, hopefully the young guys, Austin and Stanley and Wenyon are able to be a part of that. But I don't know if they know where they're going yet either. And I think really, but I mean, I could say that for most teams, not all teams. Some teams certainly know where they're going, but do the Nets know exactly where they're going with Kyrie? That's an issue. Do the Sixers know where they're going with Harden? I mean, I know where they would like to go, probably. I may not know where they'd like to go, but they know where they'd like to go. And we can go team by team, and like everybody's got something. Like the Heat, Duncan Robinson was starting in the finals a couple years ago, and now he couldn't even play in the playoffs, and they owe him a ton of money. They got to figure that out. So every team's got something to figure out. And you say like injury this, injury that with AD, like Clippers got to figure out when can Kawhi play? Paul George, so it's everybody's got their issues. The Lakers don't own drama. They're a big franchise. People love them or hate them, and they love to hate them. They're extremely popular among their fan base, and they're extremely popular among other fan bases who just love to hate on the Lakers, respectfully so. Like Laker fans hate on the Celtics right now, and so they don't want them to win. So it's all a part of the game. We'll see what happens. I look forward to it. To me, this is fun. Like figuring stuff out. I'd like to see them be a little bit more imaginative in their approach. They're going to have to take a risk somewhere. And I'll just close the point in saying, if you do nothing, that's a risk as well. Like doing nothing and just finishing with Russ. If they have another season where it's a disaster, then maybe that ushers LeBron out the door and he goes somewhere else. And, this is Darvin Ham's opportunity Laker fans are thrilled. They think he's great. And I know him pretty well, and he's a great guy from my experience. But I don't know if he can coach as a head coach. But if you give him a bad team and a mess, then it doesn't matter. Where it would be nice if he could have that opportunity where they give him something really to work with. You wouldn't want his first season to come across as like, oh, he can't coach, and sow those seeds early so that it becomes harder for him to do his job, because that's what happened with Vogel. Vogel can coach. Vogel has his flaws, but he lost the locker room. He lost the front office, and so he had to go. But it's not because he can't coach. It's because the roster they gave him was like a 180 from the style of coaching that's the way he coaches, right? He needs length, he needs depth, he needs guys to play defense, and we'll figure out how to score. But we're going to get the stops first. Whereas you gave him this roster that didn't fit that. If you're going to change styles, get rid of the coach before he has to go through all this. Now we're looking at Ham, and it's like, give him what he needs to be successful. But I'm speaking to LeBron too. Like, give him what Ham needs to be successful is an extension from you, so that the Lakers have the security to make those kind of moves they need to make, so they don't have to worry about taking a bad contract for a couple of years, or they don't have to worry about giving up a future first if they do it right. It'll be worth it in theory, because now they can make a move that makes them a contender. And if you're giving up a 2027 pick with the right protections, I don't know. Rob hasn't protected picks very well, but it's worth it if you're now a contender after being, kind of a joke this last season. I'm not saying those opportunities are there. Maybe they find that there's a dead end everywhere, but I don't believe that. I think there are some ways out of this situation, but I think it really starts with LeBron committing, and I don't know if he'll do that, to be honest. And that's part of the problem.
All right, Eric. All right, I know we're pushing for time. I have one last question, and if you don't know the answer, and if you don't want to answer, you don't have to answer it. But is Rob Palinka on the hot seat? And don't get me wrong, I'm not that huge of a Rob fan. I'll be honest with you. I said this in the past, Eric. I believe the only reason why Rob Palinka is there is because of Kobe. God rest his soul. I don't believe any other team would hire him as a general manager, me personally. But is this the year Jeannie Buss is finally saying, okay, Rob, I'm gonna give you one last chance. You have to, get us to the promised land. If that's just, deep, or make a deep playoff run. Is this a hot year for him? He's on the hot seat this year.
Right. Well, I felt like he had some plot armor, some protection from Vogel. A lot of people blame Vogel. From what I wrote and from what I understand, LeBron really pushed to get Russ. So there's some blame that the Lakers placed on LeBron and Clutch for what happened. So some of it is they felt like it was the coach. It sounds like a lot of displacing of blame. Personally, to me, like, you made the choices. You gave Vogel a roster that didn't fit his style. You went out and got Russ, who was the wrong guy to get. You gave up all your depth. And so from my point of view, just from the way I believe things, like, the person who made the decision is the one who should be taking the responsibility, not blaming Vogel, not blaming LeBron. No one's telling me what to do with my team or my own, whatever I own, like with my family. My wife tells me what to do, but that's cool. That's like, it's us, right? That's internal, but no one outside of that is telling us how to live our lives. If this, that's the closest analogy I can have. And if there's a team being run by Rob, who said at exit interviews, I'm the one who's responsible. I'm the one, and cool, good on him for saying that. I think there's a lot of appreciation for Rob for getting them to the title, and I think that they view him as a GM who got them that, and so he did something right to do that. Now we could argue and say, well, LeBron did all that and Clutch did all that by signing here as LeBron did and making sure the trade for AD happened, which really happened because they told everybody that he only wanted to play for the Lakers and all the other suitors left, and the Lakers still overpaid for him, which was a whole other thing. I think Rob is, if we have another disaster of a season, you're not going to blame it on Darvin Ham. You're going to blame it on somebody. I don't know how much you can blame the players anymore because who got the players? So I do think that this is the year for Rob to do something this offseason to protect his job. But again, he's working with a situation where he's really only capable of presenting the menu and trying to convince Jeannie and that group, the committee that runs it, to make that final choice. And again, that's not unique to Rob. It's pretty standard in this league how it works. Can he convince them what the right path is, execute it, and the Lakers actually improve from it, I don't know the answer. So, but I do think at some point you're going to have to blame someone. And if next year LeBron is like, I'm out, the team stank it up, and they let Russ go, and it's time to start going in a different direction, I'm not sure Rob will be there to do that. I don't know if he survives like another season like last year. Now, if they get to the playoffs and they don't go very far, it's a different story. If they're a much better team and it just doesn't work out for whatever reason in the playoffs, that's a different thing. But if they're like another 35-win team, or if they don't even make the play-in, yeah, I think Rob is going to take the heat for that one.
All right. Doug, Corey, Mike, do you guys have one last question before we wrap it up?
All right.
I was just going to
Eric,
ask,
Go ahead,
ask Eric. I mean, yes or no? You think Russ will be? I mean, if you had a bet on it, or knowing what you know about the organization, knowing what you know about all the fans, is Russ going to be here next? Is Russ going to be here next season? Yes or no?
Like the 2022-23 season, I'll say that yes is more likely out of paralysis because of LeBron's lack of extension or lack of commitment to an extension. He can't legally sign it till August anyway, but he can commit to it verbally, even if it's non-binding. Internally, they can commit to that. I think that paralysis is going to lead them to at least see, maybe it was Vogel. Maybe they could put better pieces around. Maybe AD will be healthy. None will be healthy. I think there's enough what ifs that they'll stick, kind of in inertia. Like there's too much. Other teams are trying to gouge them because they see them as desperate, right? Like they are, right? If other executives feel like Rob is going to get fired if he doesn't succeed, then your job is to milk Rob for everything and make his job difficult and leverage that against him. Not picking on Rob, not picking on other people. You're playing some level of poker, right? This is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to try to take advantage within reason of the other guy. Some GMs will say it's best when both sides are happy with the deal. They'll say that to the public. They'll say that to people like me. But yeah, they'd much rather be on the winning side of a deal than the losing side. That's for sure. So it's a good question. We'll have to wait and see. The decisions start in the next couple weeks. Draft is the biggest trading day of the year, so we'll have to see. And then a week later, we're in free agency, and within a few days of free agency, first week of July, we should know the heart of what the Lakers are going to be next season. Now, that doesn't mean that Russ can't be dealt in September or October or in August or something like that. But the heart of the offseason for most teams is done at the draft and in July. So we're close to it.
Well,
Yep.
we just, Laker Nation, we just need to all stand up and say a prayer and hopefully that they get this right, where we could be holed up number 18 next year around this time. Because it definitely hurts to see Boston here and we're not here, especially as a Laker fan. Eric, we want to thank you for coming on, man. It was definitely a pleasure, and we definitely appreciate the love and the knowledge that you gave us. Hope to have you back on sometime during the season next year, but thank you. And definitely good luck to you, because I know you're about to become a busy man in these next couple of weeks as well.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Again, you can follow me at Eric Pincus, EricPincus. And our immersive program, Sports Business Classroom, is, I think, July 10th through 15th in Las Vegas. Go to sportsbusinessclassroom.com. Reach out to me personally on Twitter, or you can find my emails at any of my articles. It should have my email at the bottom. And just reach out, and I'll happy to talk if you're looking to get into basketball as a career, not as a player, but as somebody in basketball operations or scouting, video analytics, media and broadcast, all that kind of stuff. I can definitely point you in the right direction if the program is right for you. So, but thank you guys. I enjoyed it. And, I wish I could say for Laker fans, like everything was just copacetic and easy and they're set to win another title. But I picked Boston to win the series. And so if they get to 18, as you suggest, it might be just to tie them up again. So, but I think it's great because, I mean, the Lakers-Celtics rivalry is as old as the NBA itself. It's, you want competition on the other side, don't you? Or you just want them to just never win again?
I don't want
Never.
Boston to win.
Doug's got something to say.
And look, there will never be a day, if you're a true Laker fan, that you cheer 1 ounce for the Boston Celtics. That's blasphemy.
Fair enough.
You know, except these young kids, you know, we got a different generation. So I understand them. They just don't understand the venom of this rivalry, and it's real venom for people like me who've been involved with it since the late 70s. And so just the thought of them making the finals almost makes me want to throw up, just me even just saying it.
Me
You know what
too.
I'm saying?
Well, I'll just say that if there's no pain in the NBA greater than losing in the finals. Like I've talked to Kobe, Shaq, guys like that, and others who have lost with other teams. There's nothing more painful. The ones like they, you know, I know we miss Kobe, but like he burned more for the finals that he lost than the ones he won. So if you're really anti-Celtics, you would want them to lose a heartbreaker in Game 7. That's more painful than not making the playoffs. I'm just saying, if you really want them to hurt for a lifetime, that's more painful than just not making the playoffs or getting to the second round. I'm just saying.
Oh, trust me, we would love for them to lose in the Game 7. But I'm gonna tell you, me personally, I might have to turn my phone off or at least 24/7 if they win, because I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. I just don't. But hey, like I said, Eric, thank you for coming on. Doug, Corey, Mike, Phil, thank you guys for coming on as well. You guys catch us on Laker 101 every Sunday at 6 p.m. Central. We'll go live this Sunday, but we'll be off the following Sunday because it is Father's Day. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Until next time, we are out.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, sir.
Hard sports all plays. Hard sports all plays.